It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Professor Tony Hall. He's been adjunct at Griffith, Urban Research Program since 2004, but prior to that was Professor of Town Planning at Anglia Ruskin University in Chelmsford in the United Kingdom. Chelmsford is in the commuter belt outside London on the eastern side, northeastern side. Unusually, Tony was a member of the Chelmsford Town Council and was chairman of their planning committee for 7 years, so that he would have had that rather interesting experience of town planning practicing at the academic level, but also at the coalface, leading Chelmsford's planning policy. Tony's book, The Life and Death of the Australian Backyard, was published in 2010 and won the 2012 Planning Institute of Australia Award. Tony's topic this morning is the death of the backyard, an issue for urban trees. Please welcome Tony Hall.
Good morning, everybody. When I came here from England 10 years ago, for the first 2 months, I was living just in a suburb of Brisbane called Carina. I then moved into the city centre by the river, but I didn't have a car. I don't have a car now since I've been in Australia, and I used to walk around in foot in Carina. And while walking around, I came across this development, and I had quite literally not seen anything like this before, because there was hardly any windows. One or two very small tinted windows, but there seemed to be almost nothing, to do with people. And when you look down the side, there didn't seem to be any space at the side or back, or windows at the side or back at all. Then when you look from above, an aerial photo, you found that there was no space around. Not only is there no kind of doors or windows at the front, there's nothing around the sides or back either. There's no land at all. There was no backyard at all. And I had never seen this before. Back in England, it wouldn't have been allowed. And I had 3 questions started to occur to me. Well, firstly, how do people manage to live in these houses where you can't see out? And secondly, why is this allowed by the planning system? And thirdly, what's it all got to do to Australia? Back in England, we used to see these dramatised documentaries called, is it Home and Away or Neighbours or something? And Australia was all supposed to be about Barbies and outdoor healthy lifestyle or sunshine and things. So what on earth is going on? So I started to research it. And I really found that there was some big change occurs in terms of both space and time. You can look at this yourself. If you look out the window of a plane just there, or look at any aerial photos, you can see that there's a big change here. Just look it down to kind of make this thing work. See, in the upper part of the picture here, you can see, as we were concerned today, older suburbs up until the end of the 1980s are dominated by trees. But then by the end of the 90s, the trees disappeared, and it's all roof to roof. And this is a big change. It happens at a certain space and time. In fact, during the 1990s, this big change occurs, and it is a dramatic change. And from the point of view here, the trees go. Let's just look at another picture here. Another picture from the suburb of Brisbane. Here we see the 1980s type suburbs up until the end. And then by the 1990s, you can see how big the change is. There's like one line here, and bang, it all changes. And all the trees sort of disappear, and all vegetation around houses disappears. But I was to discover in my work that it wasn't really just to do somehow with something problem with backyards. That was just the outward symptom. What was going on was effectively larger houses. If we look at this example here we see this house. If we look at this house here, this is more as I might have expected in Australia. You've got quite a big lot, and there's a nice house extension, and there's a little swimming pool there, there's little swings for the kids, and some trees in the property. Now we look at the lot next door, same size, but in this case, the house extends over the entire lot. There is no swimming pool, no swings, no trees. And so are all the houses. That one is almost about the same as those, but this one is unusual. All these ones, the house covers the whole lot. That is the problem. I found when trying to tell this to people, and certainly other fellow town planners, people, property industry, most people, even members of the public, would always just say, oh, it's all due to higher densities, all higher density thing, and it's all part of move to smaller houses, high density. But in fact, this is not high density inner city area. This particular place is Newman, Western Australia, iron ore mining town, thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometres from anywhere. It's completely in the middle of nowhere. And I was to discover this. This goes on in all outback towns, little mining towns. The whole thing is changing for other reasons. It is at its worst almost when you're remote from higher density urban areas, rather than being caused by it. I was to discover that up until the end of the 80s, that the maximum lot coverage is about 40%. Normally, for ordinary suburban houses, and I found this happens back in Europe as well, and North America, if you have a house with a backyard, generally the footprint of the house covers about a third of the lot at the most. Absolute maximum with extensions and things up to 40%, but generally speaking about 30%, 30-35% coverage and trees. By the late 1990s, the 40% had become the minimum. Everywhere I look in Australia now, no new house covers less than 40% of the lot. In most cases, it is much bigger. And as I will explain in a moment, at 40%, really, you've got no backyard. Now, just let's look at the older suburbs, just by comparison. The older suburbs, which I imagine, Australia. Here we look at it in Sydney from 1900s subdivision. Let's go down to Melbourne, 1930s, Q East. This is the sort of thing people are expecting. Janalai, Sydney, 1950s. Again, lovely outdoor backyards, trees, what you might expect to enjoy in the sun in Australia. Brisbane, Camp Hill, 1940s. Please have a note particularly of this one because I want to make a comparison moment. This was for returned ex-servicemen of late 1940s, Camp Hill again. Please note that this is done around 600 square metre lots and 11 dwellings per hectare, 600 square metre lots, about 29% coverage of each lot by the house footprint. But notice it has old Queenslander style houses and is big backyards with very big trees. But it's 600 square metre lots. It's the houses, big backyards at the back, and some of them contain devices for drying the clothes without electricity. Now, how about that for sustainability? But can we see this is 600 square metre lots, big backyard, lot of grass, lot of big, very big trees. But now, if you go to the roads there, very big trees again, big nature strip, but look how wide the road is. I mean, this just serves a few houses. There's no traffic justification. If you narrowed the road, the density would go up. You could have this a much higher density by having much narrower roads. Then going up to 1980s, Western Sydney, Mount Druitt, Heversham, this probably is the kind of neighbours period, the kind of what people imagine to be the modern Australian suburb. This is the last gasp, probably, of the backyard, of low-density houses with gardens and vegetation and trees. Now, let's turn to the more recent developments, the 1990s onwards. And let's get this, we'll start in Melbourne as we're here, as you want to see things from Melbourne. Again, as you go out to North Melbourne, particularly out here to Meadow Heights, you begin to see a definite kinds of pattern of the modern suburb. The planners insist on a big front setback, which is not used for very much. It's often just grass, a little bit of vegetation. There might be occasional trees, but they're not very big. And there's a big integral garage and perhaps one kind of window and one door looking onto the street. Now, going out to Western Sydney, Mount Druitt, Rooty Hill, not so I'm led to believe the most fashionable part of Sydney, but late 1990s. And I can still remember the shock when I first looked at this aerial photo before I even went there. Because what we can see here, this is only 90 dwellings per hectare. It's not amazingly high density, a bit under 400 square metre average lot size, 45% coverage. But what we have here is houses completely surrounded on all four sides by other houses. See the ones down here? And one here. Now, this is not later infill. It has been built like that to start with, right from the scratch. How I was to find out later, these are called battle axe lots, and it's been built like that to start with. So whereas the other ones have got completely enclosed at the rear and the sides, these are enclosed on all four sides. And this is what the normal streets look like. Again, you find an absolute same pattern of the integral garage, the one window, the big front setback with almost nothing on it. And this is what the battle axe lots look like. Now, some people say to me, oh, well, this just a bit of backyard. This is what people want. The people don't want backyards anymore. You know, they don't do that. The market must prevail. Developers are just responding to what people want. Is that so? Now, am I to understand that people go into the estate agent saying, I want one of these, I am desperate to avoid a view. I want a big metal fence in front of all my windows. But all sides that. I don't like all this looking out on the thing there. Do they ask for these, as the developer saying, I've got to provide this? And if they are, if this is what modern Australian dream is all about, doesn't that raise serious questions about what modern Australia is all about? If this is what people are wanting. So one little detail, can we notice it's all shuttered up? Because it's in the daytime, and there's a car I suspect belongs to one of the adjacent properties, but people were not there. Every time I walked around a lot of these estates or my researches, I was completely alone. It was deserted in the daytime, and I didn't have a car. I was walking on foot, and particularly ones I don't show you here in Adelaide, it was, not only I was 40 minutes by train outside the city, and then a long bus ride, and then you get to these places. There's just nobody around at all in the daytime. Springfield Lakes, outside western Brisbane, early 2000s. All these ones are called lakes around Brisbane because of the water. Anyway, you get 46% coverage. This is again just under 600 square metre lots, 16 dwellings per hectare. But again, you get all this. You notice the same pattern all over the country. All looks the same, as I described before. But if we look at here, again, some details here. Firstly, back and side fences exposed, which is to be dreadful urban design. It's not very good for security, either for the people on the street or the house, but not very aesthetic either. But where the fence is exposed, it shows how little space there is around the house. Also, please note how few windows. Also, we've got this huge amount of space at the front, which again has very little function, just a few little plants on it. There's occasional little trees. I don't know, you'll know more than I will, whether those trees will grow. But another one, Springfield Lakes again. Very bad that the back and side fences are exposed, but it does show how little space there is around. Again, can you note the lack of windows? And also, what is this? This space got wasted. Why is that there? It seems to have no function. It doesn't even the front. This is the front setback, the panels. But why hasn't this space been given to the property or used? See, there could be a front setback could have the function if it had big trees on. But there aren't any big trees, and they're not a requirement. In fact, I believe that some of the developers try to discourage any kind of planting or anything. So, but it just shows, these are examples here of what is actually going on. But it's going on everywhere. Now, Perth, Spearwood, early 2000. Now, all the figures I give you, I've measured myself. It's 14 dwellings per hectare. Now, this, I found, was 600 square metre lots. In fact, the frequency distribution of lot size was exactly the same as Camp Hill in Brisbane I showed you earlier. That was the one with the Queenslanders and the big trees and the hills hoist. So, the lot size here is exactly the same as that Camp Hill. But as we see here, there are no trees, hardly any vegetation, no backyards, colossal houses. So it is not, as I was frequently told, it's all a matter of small lots nowadays. The lot sizes are getting smaller, and that's the cause of it. It's higher density, small lots over there. No, I mean, you can just get this. It's exactly the same lot size as Camp Hill. And so you see, this is 56% coverage. Again, people might say, oh, that looks about 90%. No, at 56% coverage, this is what you get. And this it looks like. And it looks like at the front, And you see how it was all covered in hard surfaces, very little green. Huge integral garages, doors, hardly any windows and doors, look out. But the front setback, little bits of grass again, but not put to make function. And here you see there, yes, some nature strips or front setbacks, they're just grass, exposed back fences, nothing space around the house, just a little tiny bit of planting. But really, what's all this planted for? You see, it doesn't, all this space going to waste. It doesn't seem to be rhyme or reason to me. About the whole, not only is it ugly and bad for security, if your windows. If you look, now this, again there, this was a particularly large house on this development. We're now looking over some back fences, some undeveloped lots, to look at that same house. Can you see how big it is? Can you see how few windows there are? How the metal fence is right along the windowless side, and how huge it is. There's no shortage of money kind of things or anything. It's a huge lot and a huge house, but no green space, no vegetation, nothing. This is the one next door, that's the house. There's the one next door. Again, can we notice how little space, how few windows, huge internal space, which has no natural light or ventilation. Now, why should this be a problem? Some people say, oh, people don't want backyards. But I would say that's a huge problem, even for the non-residents. I found that people seem to have very little idea in any conversations, particularly even with the professionals, about the actual function of vegetation around houses and planting. These developments here will have increased stormwater runoff, hotter microclimate. You're going to have minimal biodiversity, a reduced absorption of pollutants, not just carbon dioxide and other pollutants, because there just is no vegetation, no trees. And this is suffered by the whole community, even if the residents don't want a backyard and never go outdoors, which some of them don't, or they don't go to they don't go into the open air because it's not air conditioned. I'm sure that is literally the case. We can talk after questions. I'm sure loads of people here never go outdoors because they go from their air-conditioned house into the integral garage into the air-conditioned car. They drive there, and there's a lot of shopping centres certainly around I am. You go underground to the shopping centre, so you don't need to go outdoor car park. And you've got the same thing in the office. You never go outdoors in the open air. We've got, therefore, the poor quality townscape we're seeing, reduced surveillance of the public realm, bad security. Now, the residents themselves also lack the pleasant outlook from windows, secure play for very young children in touch with nature around the house. They've also got dark interiors, the whole heat island effect, that the roofs absorb the heat and the air conditioners push it out into the narrow gap between the houses, which does not get breezes to remove it, and it's absorbed again and gets a vicious circle. And so you get increased electricity consumption. Told at Springfield Lakes, when we went there, and you go there in the summer, it's dreadful. The whole noise of the air conditioners and the huge heat island effect and the reflection of the heat from the kind of concrete surfaces. There's no opportunity, home food production, waste disposal like composting, water collection, storage, rainwater tanks. There's just no space around the house. Now, why is all this happening, if it's all so bad? Is it required by higher densities? Because this is almost immediately I get, particularly from professionals in the area builders, everyone says, oh, it's higher densities all a lot. As I've indicated, I don't think it's the case at all. But would it be required by, if it was higher density? Just look, to go back to England, where I come from, to Letchworth Garden City, built 100 years ago. When people look at Letchworth, well, the world's very first planned garden city, they imagine it must be low density. It's got big trees everywhere, big open grass area, lots of planting, big backyards like this. But the density is about 20 to 30 dwellings per hectare. If you look at the map there, you can see most of the land is sort of green. The actual buildings take up a very small proportion of the land area. Most of the land is devoted to planted areas, to back gardens, allotments, this sort of thing. Why? Because the houses are very small. They're small and terraced. So the density is quite high, much higher than Australia, even though it is totally landscape dominated. Looking at current British practice in residential design, the government policy has been to new housing to at least 30 dwellings per hectare. This is down from near Chelmsford, where I used to live. This is 30 dwellings per hectare. This is under construction, so that's why there's no trees at the moment. But you can see you've got big back gardens. even though it's 30 dwellings per hectare, you've got at least 100 square metre back gardens because the houses are all terraced. Another development here, 34 per hectare. Again, the white area is all the back gardens. The houses are brought very near to the street. Very little space is taken up by roads at the front. The houses are all 2- and 3-storey terraced, and so that that gives quite a high density, but all the space is at the back. It's all space in back gardens. So just to go back a bit, you see the houses, the built form takes up only a very small proportion of the total land area. Most of it is green. This is some of the dimensions there. So you've got lots of only 210, 270 square metres, over 30 dwellings per hectare, but the back gardens range from 100 to 135 square metres. This development, Chelmsford, is 55 dwellings per hectare. You can see from above here, most of the land, though, is green. The developers have to provide big back gardens and big public park in addition. There's no compensation. There's no question the developers don't have to provide a local park because they're providing backyards, or the other way, or the version, or vice versa. This is the higher cost townhouses, 3-storey townhouses, terraced, and they've got big backyards. The high density comes from blocks of flats on the corners, about 4 stories, but the blocks of flats are required to have communal backyards, and there's a tree there for good measure. That's all required by the plans, required to have that. And again, developers have to provide a park in addition to the backyards. Now back to Australian problem. As I have tried to argue and show you the pictures, in Australia it is a matter of larger houses, not smaller lots. What you find is that people drive to the price level. They drive along the public provided motorways till they can find a lot that they can afford. But then the house and land are sold separately, unlike in Britain where the developers build all the houses. Then the developer has interest in maximising the floor area for the price. They want to sell quantity, not quality. It's like American fast food. You know, you go into McDonald's, you can't buy a better one. They want you to stack the burgers up or have a Subway that's twice as long or something like this. It's quantity. What the developer wants to do is to, the builder particularly, is to sell something big, but which doesn't cost them much to make at all. So, how do they do that? Single-storey concrete slab. It means you minimise wall length per unit area, which means you have this big, deep square plan. It means that all the space is internal. Very few windows, large integral garage. If you probably were to design a house that was going to be very nice to live in Australia, it might be L-shaped, the L-shape enclosing a swimming pool and garden. All the rooms had big windows looking out onto the swimming pool and gardens. It would be beautiful to live in. But it would maximise wall length and windows per unit area. Even back in Britain, I had all the time problems with builders and developers who didn't want to put windows in. They saw windows as an expense, as you were seeing here. But this is what is happening. People saying, you're going to have a big house, and which, you know, we will charge a lot of money for, but doesn't cost as much to build. Also, what happens at the same time is the working hours go up. The Australian working hours rises dramatically compared to other countries. If you look particular thing here, back, this is people employed at weekends, people working 50 hours a week more. 1978, Australia was down here. Now, Australia's not only got the largest houses, it has the longest working hours in the world. And all this happens at exactly the same time in the 1990s. And debt, of course, comes in with this as well. Household debt, mortgages. The whole massive social change takes place in Australia. We could talk about that one there. But just going on, now why is it not prevented, though? One of my questions I said occurred at the beginning, why does the planning system not prevent it? I found this was more a matter of a question of sins of omission and commission. If you want to build a house with a big backyard, no one stops you. But you get, these are figures for Queensland, you have got lots greater than 450 square metres. You have a maximum 50% site coverage. Now, 50% sounds okay. Half garden, half house. But in fact, if you do it, you can do this little doodle yourself. if you do a little doodle with draw up to size a 300 square metre block or a 600 square metre block, and then you draw a 2 metre gap around, you quickly find that 2 metre gap takes up 300, about half the area. And then if you then take off the front setback as well, this is why you find that above 40% coverage, you effectively got no backyard. If you'd want 40 backyards, you've got to have a maximum, not of 50% coverage, but I would say 35%. Queensland Development Code, my book contains samples from Victoria for there, but just look at this little example. It says for 50% above, smaller than 450 square metres, 50% maximum site coverage, but you've got to have a little 4 times 4 metre space, so they know that that area is taken up by the strip around. So to make sure that you have got a little sitting out space, you get a whole 16 square metres. And then in the Brisbane City Plan for 2000, if you had got your lot was longer than 25 metres, but less than 450 square metres in area, you'd had a rear setback of 6 metres, which sounds okay. That sounds, at least you have got at least a 6, not very much as it used to be, but that sounds good. However, it's only if the depth is greater than 25 metres. If the depth is less than 25 metres, you don't need one. So the non-answer is good. So let's look at this thing here. This is what on the cover of my book. This is again back to Carina there. This is a new development. Here on the left-hand road, you see some about 1970s, 80s suburban, exact date, with kind of big backyards. The other side of the road, new development, called by the developers Celestial Court. It's named after the stars. But again, guess what the depth of the lot is? It's 24 metres. So they don't need any. If it's 25 metres, they need a 6 metres at the back, but they don't. You notice all this white area is poured concrete with no top. You imagine what it's like in the summer when the sun comes out. The only bit of tree is this thing in the middle. Everything else, well, you see what it's like. But that again is, this is 62% coverage. It looks like 90%, but it's 62%. That's what 62% coverage looks like. And now, if a little thing here, can you see these little houses here? Probably people have put these kind of houses in the backyard. And perhaps over time, this side of the road would end up looking like this side. Just quickly, just a few things. If you want to see a few more scary pictures. Okay, just there. This is Gold Coast. This is what's called a retirement village. Hate retirement villages. Back in England, they were trying to put a stop to make sure I didn't have any in Chelmsford. I explain now that there used to be an idea that that if you were retired, then you had time to spend in the garden. But now the retirement villages now are so-called are the worst in respect. That in terms of being absolutely zero planting. I mean, this is they're right out middle of nowhere as well. So, this isn't a retirement village. This is at Gold Coast there, but again, it's a gated thing. There's only one. That's the only entrance and exit. More fortifications all around here, and it's. This is not retirement, but again, you see this. You can see all these all the time. This is Varsity Lakes in Gold Coast. North Lakes, appalling place north of Brisbane. Around Perth. Perth's supposed to have this sort of guidance, livable neighbourhoods, but doesn't have any effect on the houses. I explain all this in the book. This is all there. The Joondalup, quite supposed to be very new urbanist, but again, there's zero backyards. Ascot Waters, we've got some houses here, and here we've got this Ascot Waters, and when the building is we say that. So perhaps I could just leave you with these pictures there, the modern Australian dream. Okay, thank you.